She bought an abandoned beach hotel for $30,000 at a foreclosure auction. But when she climbed to the penthouse alone, she found something that would destroy the man who destroyed her family. The summer heat pressed down like a hand on her shoulders. Salt air drifted through the broken windows of the old Ocean View Hotel, carrying the smell of rust and jasmine and decades of decay. Cicadas screamed in the palms outside, their song rising and falling in waves that seemed almost angry. The ocean was a distant rumble, like a sleeping giant breathing in its sleep, waves crashing against the beach with rhythmic violence. She stood in the lobby with her son, 8 years old, holding his small hand in hers. The boy stared up at the cracked ceiling where water damage had bloomed like dark flowers across the plaster. Chunks of it hung in strips, threatening to fall at any moment. A chandelier tilted at an unnatural angle, swaying slightly though there was no wind to move it, crystals covered in decades of dust. "It's scary," he whispered, pressing closer to her leg, his voice barely audible above the sound of the cicadas. "It's ours," she said, squeezing his hand tighter than she meant to. The auction had taken 3 minutes. No one else had bid. The auctioneer had looked almost apologetic as he'd brought down the gavel. The bank didn't care who bought it. They just wanted the debt cleared from their books, the property off their liability sheet. She'd scraped together $30,000 from a teacher's severance package, a small inheritance from her mother who died 2 years ago, and a second mortgage on the modest house she rented out to tourists during the summer season. It was insane. Everyone had told her so. Her ex-husband, her friends, the bank officer who'd processed the mortgage paperwork with barely concealed pity. But it was also justice. 20 years ago, this hotel had been the crown jewel of Palmetto Beach. 6 stories of Art Deco glamour, a rooftop bar with the best view of the Atlantic, a nightclub in the basement where the wealthy came to drink and dance and forget their problems. Celebrities had stayed here. Politicians. People whose names appeared in magazines and newspapers. The owner had been Richard Holloway, wealthy beyond measure, connected to every powerful family in 3 states, untouchable by anyone who might question him. He'd also been the man who'd seduced her sister when she was 17 years old. Sarah had been a cocktail waitress at the hotel bar, working summer season to earn money for college. Beautiful, naive, full of hope about the future. Holloway was 35, married with 2 children, powerful enough to destroy anyone who crossed him. He'd promised her the world. He'd promised her love, a future, everything a 17-year-old girl might dream about. She believed him because she was young and hopeful and believed people were essentially good. When she got pregnant, Holloway had denied it was his, had paid her to disappear, had made her sign documents that forbade her from ever speaking his name again, documents drafted by expensive lawyers who made the threat of destruction very clear. Sarah had moved to Charleston, raised her daughter alone in a tiny apartment, worked 2 jobs to make ends meet, and died of cancer at 42 years old, exhausted and broken and convinced she'd failed at everything. Her daughter, her niece Maya, had tracked down Holloway 5 years ago, desperate for answers, desperate for some kind of explanation or apology or acknowledgement. She confronted him in his office downtown, walked past security and reception and burst into his office during a meeting. He'd laughed in her face, told her Sarah was a liar and a gold digger who tried to trap him with a fake pregnancy, told her to leave before he called the police. The girl had driven her car off the Palmetto Bridge 2 weeks later. 22 years old. Her whole life ahead of her. No one had ever held Richard Holloway accountable. But the universe had its own sense of justice, slow and inexorable. 10 years ago, a younger woman had accused him of assault. He'd settled out of court, paid her silence with a check that came with a non-disclosure agreement drafted by the same lawyers who'd silenced Sarah. Then another woman came forward. And another. And another. The lawsuits had mounted like snow accumulating during a winter storm. His business had crumbled. His wife had finally left him, taking their children and most of his assets. His reputation had collapsed like a house built on sand. By the time the Ocean View Hotel was seized for unpaid taxes, Richard Holloway had already fled to Miami, leaving behind only debts and secrets and the ruins of his empire. But he'd left something else behind too. Something he didn't know existed. She walked through the lobby slowly, letting her son explore the ruins of former grandeur. The tile floor was cracked in places, stained in others where water had pooled and dried repeatedly. A front desk sat empty, its wooden cubbyholes still holding old room keys from guests long forgotten, keys that would never open anything again. A grand piano occupied one corner, its ivory keys yellowed and chipped, its wood warped by humidity and time, strings inside probably broken beyond repair. She moved toward the staircase, marble once elegant and impressive, now stained with watermarks and crumbling at the edges. Her footsteps echoed through the empty space, multiplied by silence and emptiness. A plaque on the wall read, Ocean View Hotel, St. 1952, a Palmetto Beach institution. She climbed the stairs slowly, testing each step before putting her full weight on it. The marble groaned under her feet. Her son followed behind her, running his hand along the salt-damaged railing, leaving trails in the dust. The second floor held the restaurant. Round tables with white tablecloths that had turned gray with dust accumulation over the years. Chandeliers hung dark from the ceiling, their bulbs long since burned out or stolen. The kitchen beyond was a graveyard of old appliances, an industrial stove with burners crusted in ancient grease, a walk-in refrigerator with its door hanging open, pots and pans scattered across the floor like the aftermath of a violent storm. She kept climbing, her son's breathing getting heavier as they went higher. The third floor held guest rooms, doors hanging open, furniture covered in sheets. The fourth floor the same, each level more decayed than the last. By the time they reached the fifth floor, the air felt different. Heavier, more charged, like something was waiting for her to discover it, had been waiting for years. The penthouse occupied the entire top floor. A single set of double doors, oak ornately carved with Art Deco designs, standing open like an invitation she couldn't refuse. She hesitated at the threshold, feeling her pulse quicken, feeling something like dread mixed with anticipation. Stay here, she told her son, though there was nothing dangerous about the hallway. He nodded, understanding without understanding, sitting down on the floor to wait. She stepped through the penthouse doors alone. The room took her breath away. It was enormous, 40 feet across, with walls of floor-to-ceiling windows that framed the ocean like living art. The view was spectacular even through the salt-stained glass. The furniture was still here, covered in white sheets like ghosts waiting to be uncovered. An enormous bed with a carved headboard. A couch that probably cost more than her house. A second grand piano identical to the one downstairs. Paintings hung on the walls, originals probably worth thousands, their frames tarnished but still ornate. But it wasn't the furniture that held her attention. It was the desk. A mahogany monstrosity, positioned to face the windows so Holloway could sit there and gaze out at the ocean while he worked, while he plotted, while he destroyed lives. Papers lay scattered across its surface, yellowed, water-stained, but still legible in the afternoon light that poured through the windows. She moved closer, hands trembling slightly, heart pounding in her chest. Financial statements. Contracts written in dense legal language. Handwritten notes in a scrawl she recognized from court documents she'd researched obsessively over the years. And photographs. Dozens of them scattered across the desk like evidence at a crime scene. Young women. Dates written on the back in faded ink. Some names she recognized from the news reports about the assault allegations that had finally brought Holloway down. Faces she'd memorized while following the cases. But more troubling were the other papers beneath the photographs. Names. Amounts. Dates going back decades. A ledger. A record of every payment Holloway had made to silence women. Every settlement. Every bribe to local officials to make problems disappear. Every piece of evidence of systematic, deliberate, calculated abuse spanning 40 years. She sat at the desk carefully, afraid it might collapse under her weight or that she might wake from some fever dream. Her hands trembled as she gathered the papers, organized them by date, tried to understand the full scope of what she was seeing. This was the evidence. The proof that prosecutors would have paid millions to find. The documentation that would finally make the truth undeniable. That would finally hold Holloway accountable for everything he'd done. She heard footsteps on the stairs, slow, heavy, deliberate, climbing toward the penthouse. Her pulse spiked violently. She grabbed the canvas bag she brought with her, shoved the papers inside with shaking hands. The footsteps grew closer, echoing up the stairwell, getting louder with each second, then stopped just outside the penthouse doors. "Hello," a voice called. Male uncertain. "Anyone up there?" "Building inspector." She held her breath, not moving, not making a sound, clutching the bag to her chest. Silence for a long moment. Then the footsteps retreated slowly, then faster, then faded completely. She waited 5 minutes, then 10, listening to her own heartbeat before moving again. Then she went back downstairs, took her son's hand, and walked out into the summer heat that hit her like a physical blow. In her car, parked 2 blocks away in the shade of a live oak, she opened the canvas bag with trembling fingers. The documents spread across her lap like a confession written in blood and ink in years of silence. 40 years of corruption, assault, coercion, all documented in Holloway's own handwriting, preserved by accident or arrogance or some combination of both. She started the engine and drove home, checking the rearview mirror obsessively the entire way. Tonight she would read every page. Tomorrow everything would change. She'd slept 3 hours and hadn't rested at all. Dreams had plagued her, her sister's face, her niece's car going over the bridge, Holloway's laugh echoing through empty rooms. The documents lay spread across her kitchen table like evidence at a crime scene. The morning light was brutal and honest, illuminating details she'd missed in the darkness of the previous night. She read through them again, slowly this time, making notes in a leather journal. Dates, names, amounts, building a map of the conspiracy, trying to understand the full scope of what Holloway had done. Some of the women she recognized from news stories over the decades. Their faces had appeared in newspapers, quickly buried by better-funded narratives. Others were anonymous, just initials and dollar amounts. Just women who'd been silenced and paid off and told their trauma didn't matter. Told to disappear and never speak again. $50,000. MC discretion required. $75,000. JR new identity arranged. $100,000. SM. Moving expenses plus 6 months rent. Her sister's initials were there. Third entry from the bottom of the first page. $40,000. SM child support. 18-year arrangement. She stared at it for a long time, vision blurring with tears she refused to let fall. $40,000 to make her sister disappear. To silence the truth. To ensure that Richard Holloway's reputation remained pristine in the eyes of the Palmetto Beach elite. That his business continued thriving. That his life went on undisturbed. Her phone rang at 8 a.m., jolting her from her thoughts. Unknown number. She answered cautiously. Miss Chun. A man's voice, professional and cold, like ice water through a speaker. This is Marcus Webb. I represent the Holloway estate. I understand you've purchased the Ocean View Hotel. She said nothing, stayed silent, waiting to see what he would reveal, what he knew or suspected. My client would like to discuss a purchase agreement. He's willing to pay $200,000 for the property. Cash. Today. You sign the papers, you walk away with a profit, and this all goes away cleanly. $200,000. 6 times what she'd paid. Enough to solve every financial problem she had and then some. Enough to give her son opportunities she'd never dreamed of. Why? She asked carefully, keeping her voice neutral. I'm sorry. Why would he pay that? The hotel's worthless. The bank couldn't even give it away at auction. So why the sudden interest in a property that's been abandoned for a decade? A pause. She could hear him breathing through the phone, calculating, deciding how much to reveal. My client is interested in redevelopment opportunities, he said finally, the lie obvious in his tone. She knew it was a lie before he finished the sentence. Knew exactly what he was really buying. Not the building, not the land, but silence. The destruction of whatever evidence might still exist in that penthouse. Tell him no, she said. Miss Chun, I strongly advise you to reconsider. She hung up. Her son appeared in the doorway, still in his Spider-Man pajamas, hair sticking up in the back. Mom? Are we going to the hotel today? Yes, baby. But we need to be careful, okay? If anyone asks about the hotel, if anyone tries to talk to you about what we found there, you come get me immediately. No questions, no hesitation. Promise me. He nodded seriously, understanding that this was important even if he didn't understand why. Are we in trouble? No. But we need to protect something important. Something that matters. That afternoon, she hired a lawyer after calling 3 different firms. Sarah Chan, no relation, though she appreciated the synchronicity of the shared surname, 50s, sharp-eyed, moved with the efficiency of someone used to fighting uphill battles and winning more often than not. They met in a coffee shop on Main Street, sitting in the back corner away from other patrons. Sarah ordered black coffee and listened while she spread the documents across the table, hands still trembling slightly. Sarah read in silence, her expression not changing, but her hands tightening on the papers as if she might tear them, jaw clenching tighter with each page. "Where did you find these?" Sarah asked quietly, not looking up from the ledger. "The Penthouse." They were on the desk, like someone had left them there intentionally, like someone was waiting for someone to find them, to finally tell the truth. "Has anyone else seen them?" "Holloway's lawyer called this morning. Offered me $200,000 to sell the property." Sarah smiled thinly, a smile without joy, a smile that suggested she'd seen this pattern before. "Then he knows they exist. Or at least suspects. Or maybe he's just covering his bases, trying to control a situation before it spirals." "What do I do?" Sarah gathered the papers carefully, treating them like sacred objects, like evidence that could change everything. "We make copies. Multiple sets. We contact the prosecutor's office. We go through proper channels. We document everything meticulously. And we don't tell anyone, and I mean anyone, what we've found. Not yet. Not until we understand the full scope of what we're dealing with and have protection in place." She nodded, understanding the gravity of what Sarah was saying, understanding that this was dangerous in ways she couldn't fully comprehend yet. "This is dangerous," Sarah continued, meeting her eyes directly. "Holloway has money, connections. He's going to fight hard to keep these documents from becoming public. He's going to try to discredit you, to destroy you, to make you regret the day you ever found that hotel. He'll come after your reputation, your job, your custody of your son. Everything. I don't care. You should. For your son's sake, if nothing else." But she did care. She cared about her sister. About her niece Maya. About every woman whose name was written in that ledger. Every woman whose life had been destroyed by Richard Holloway's systematic abuse. That night, she photocopied every document in the back office of the hotel, using an old copier she'd found in what used to be the business center. 16 pages, copied 3 times, each copy carefully checked for quality. One set went to Sarah in a sealed envelope marked confidential, attorney work product. One set to her home safe, hidden behind a loose brick in the kitchen wall. One set to a safety deposit box at the bank under a pseudonym she'd created specifically for this purpose. Insurance. Protection. A guarantee that even if something happened to her, the truth would survive. As she was locking up the hotel, checking each door and window, she heard a noise from upstairs. Footsteps. Deliberate. Searching. Someone was going through the hotel, looking for something. She grabbed her phone, dialed 911, and whispered her location to the dispatcher in a voice barely above a whisper, trying not to reveal her position. The footsteps stopped suddenly. Then someone ran down the stairs, through the lobby, out the front door with a bang that echoed through the empty building. She ran after them, reached the front entrance just in time to see a black sedan pulling away from the curb. The license plate caught the streetlight for just a moment. A custom plate, Rollo. Richard Holloway was in Palmetto Beach, and he knew she'd found something. The prosecutor was skeptical, which she'd expected but still found frustrating. District Attorney Patricia Williams sat behind her desk in a windowless office that smelled of coffee and desperation, and too many late nights. She examined the documents with the expression of someone who'd seen too many cases fall apart on technicalities, seen too many guilty people walk free because of procedural errors. "These are documents," she said carefully, choosing her words like someone navigating a minefield. "They're not evidence unless we can establish a chain of custody and prove they're genuine. Defense lawyers will argue they're forgeries, that you created them to harm their client." She sat across from Williams with Sarah beside her, steady as stone, professional and calm in a way that helped ground her. "Can't you subpoena him? Force him to testify about their authenticity? To what end? He'll claim they're forgeries created by someone with a grudge. Without corroborating witnesses or additional documentation or expert testimony establishing their age and authenticity, we don't have a prosecutable case. We have suspicious documents and accusations. What about the women? The ones who were paid off? Their names are right there in the ledger. Williams sighed, rubbing her temples. Some are willing to talk. I've already started reaching out through intermediaries. Most are too frightened or too ashamed. Many signed settlements that included non-disclosure agreements that make it illegal for them to discuss what happened without facing their own legal jeopardy. She felt something collapse inside her chest. So he gets away with it, she said quietly. Again, just like he always has. Not necessarily, but we need to do this carefully, legally, conclusively, build a case that can't be challenged. Otherwise, he walks on a technicality and we've given him a roadmap for how to cover his tracks next time, made him more careful about destroying evidence. 3 days later, Marcus Webb called her directly, his voice colder than before. My client has left the country, he said flatly, no pretense of politeness remaining. He's unlikely to return. I suggest you let this go and accept his previous offer of $200,000 for the property. Consider it a generous settlement for any misunderstanding. She laughed. A sound without humor, brittle and sharp. Tell your client I'm going to expose everything he did. Every woman he assaulted. Every bribe he paid. Every lie he told. Tell him to enjoy running, because the truth is coming whether he's here or not. She hung up before he could respond, but inside she was terrified, her hands shaking so badly she had to sit down. She'd put everything she had into this hotel. If Holloway disappeared, if he managed to stay hidden in some country without extradition treaties, then the evidence meant nothing. The ledger meant nothing. The truth meant nothing because there would be no trial, no justice, no accountability. That evening, a delivery truck pulled up to the hotel while she was checking the plumbing in the basement. The driver handed her a legal notice in a manila envelope, made her sign for it, and left quickly as if he didn't want to be associated with whatever was inside. Holloway was suing her. Tortious interference with a business relationship. Defamation. Invasion of privacy. Trespassing. Theft of private documents. The lawsuit was for $5 million. She called Sarah immediately, hands shaking so badly she could barely hold the phone, vision blurring with tears of frustration and fear. It's a scare tactic, Sarah said, her voice steady and reassuring, the voice of someone who'd seen this pattern before. He's trying to bankrupt you into silence, trying to make the cost of telling the truth so high that you'll give up. Is it working? Do you want to quit? She thought of her sister Sarah, working 2 jobs and dying alone. Thought of her niece Maya driving off that bridge at 22. Thought of all the other women in that ledger. No, she said, voice stronger than she felt. I'm not quitting. Then we fight. And we win. But fighting costs money she didn't have. Legal fees. Expert witnesses to authenticate the documents. Depositions. Court costs. The $5 million lawsuit was designed specifically to drain her resources before they could even begin to build a criminal case against him. She sat in the penthouse late that night, in the dark, staring out at the ocean where the waves crashed against the beach with the sound of endless breaking, endless rhythm. And then she remembered something. The documents weren't the only things in the penthouse. She'd been so focused on the ledger that she hadn't fully searched the rest of the space. She searched more carefully now, moving methodically through each area, checking behind paintings, under furniture, inside drawers. In a locked drawer under the desk, she found a small brass key that didn't match any lock she'd seen so far. She searched the walls, tapping, listening for hollow spaces. Behind a painting of a yacht at sunset, she found it. A wall safe, small and old, its combination lock long since broken, held shut only by the painting covering it. She opened it carefully. Inside, passports with Holloway's face but different names. Paul Richards, Robert Hall, Michael Waters. Stacks of cash in various currencies. Jewelry that probably belonged to women he'd assaulted, kept as trophies. And a phone. An old iPhone, maybe 5 or 6 years old, with a cracked screen and a battery completely dead. She took it home, plugged it in carefully, and waited while it charged. When it finally powered on, she nearly dropped it. The files were still there, years of them, preserved in digital amber. Photographs, videos, text messages with other men, other people involved in the scheme, coordinating their stories and alibis. Documentation of a conspiracy that went far beyond Holloway alone, that implicated lawyers and police officers and even a judge. And at the bottom of the file list, saved carefully, One video labeled simply insurance policy. She opened it with trembling hands, not sure what to expect. Holloway appeared on the screen, sitting at the same desk where she'd found the documents. Younger, maybe 5 years ago, but unmistakably him. "If you're watching this, I'm probably dead or gone," he said to the camera, voice calm and matter-of-fact. "This is my insurance policy. Everything I've done, everything I'm about to do, everyone I've paid to help me, it's all documented here. But I wanted to record my own version of events first. Insurance in case things go sideways, in case my partners decide to throw me under the bus." He proceeded to confess to everything. 40 years of assaults, bribes, cover-ups. Named names. Provided dates. Detailed the conspiracy. She rewatched it 3 times, barely breathing, unable to believe what she was seeing. Then she called Sarah, not caring that it was 2 in the morning. "You need to come to my house. Right now. And bring D.A. Williams if you can reach her." When they arrived 40 minutes later, she showed them the video. Sarah watched silently, her jaw tightening with each word Holloway spoke. D.A. Williams's expression shifted from skepticism to fury to grim determination. "This is enough," Williams said finally, voice shaking slightly with suppressed emotion. "This is more than enough. We can move on this immediately. We can file charges, get warrants, start extradition proceedings." "But he's in another country," Sarah pointed out. "Not for long. We'll coordinate with Interpol. We'll work with Costa Rican authorities. That's where we think he is based on passport tracking. He's not going to hide forever. Men like him always make mistakes." She felt something unlock inside her chest. Felt like she could breathe fully for the first time in weeks. He'd hidden his own confession in the penthouse. Left it there like a message in a bottle cast into the future. Like evidence he thought would protect him but would ultimately destroy him. Like he'd known, somewhere deep inside, that the truth always surfaces eventually. That justice, however delayed, eventually arrives. The offer came through Holloway's lawyer, Marcus Webb, exactly 1 week after D.A. Williams filed formal charges. $3 million. Not to stay silent. Not exactly. The legal language was carefully constructed. But to agree to a comprehensive settlement that includes a mutual non-disclosure agreement regarding all aspects of the Holloway matter, past, present, and future, and an acknowledgement that all parties acted in good faith. She read it aloud to Sarah in the lawyer's office, sitting across from a woman who'd become not just her legal representative, but her friend and ally. "They're panicking," Sarah said, satisfaction evident in her voice. $3 million means they think you're close to something that will destroy them completely. Aren't we? We have the video confession. We have the documents. We have the safe full of evidence. We have the passport showing he's been using false identities to flee prosecution. We have enough to convict him of multiple felonies and extradite him from wherever he's hiding. So yes, we are. So why offer money if they know they're going to lose?" Sarah leaned back in her chair. "Because even with all that evidence, trials are risky. Juries can be unpredictable. Evidence can be challenged by expensive expert witnesses. Appeals can drag on for years. $3 million is guaranteed money. Conviction is not. They're offering you certainty." She thought about it for a long time, staring at the number on the settlement offer. $3 million would set her and her son up for life. She could renovate the hotel properly, turn it into a real business that might actually succeed. She could travel. She could rest. She could stop fighting battles that exhausted her. She could finally just live. Her ex-husband texted her that evening, his message dripping with condescension. "Heard you got a settlement offer. $3 million. Take it. Stop stirring up trouble and making our son's life difficult. Kids don't need a mother who's obsessed with revenge against dead history." She stared at the message for a long time, then deleted it without responding. That night, she sat in the penthouse alone, watching the sun set over the ocean. The light turned from gold to amber to deep red, painting the sky in colors that seemed almost unreal, almost painted. A pelican landed on the railing, tilted its head, watched her with one beady eye as if judging her decision. She thought about her sister Sarah, dead at 42. Thought about her niece Maya, 22 years old, driving off a bridge. Thought about all the other women whose names were written in that ledger, whose lives had been destroyed or diminished or forever altered by Richard Holloway's actions. She pulled out her phone, called Sarah Chun. "Tell them no," she said without preamble. "Are you absolutely sure? $3 million is." "I'm sure. This isn't about money. It never was." Silence for a moment. Then, "They're going to retaliate. Harder this time." "I know. Let them try." And they did. The next day, news broke online and in the local paper that she'd been investigated for embezzlement from her previous job as a schoolteacher. It was a complete fabrication, a lie constructed from whole cloth. She'd actually been fired for reporting sexual harassment by the principal, not for stealing. But the accusation was in the news now, spreading through the small-town gossip mill like poison through water, impossible to fully remove. Parents called the school where she'd worked, demanding explanations. Former colleagues avoided her calls. Her name became associated with scandal and theft in whispered conversations at grocery stores and coffee shops. Her son came home from school 3 days later with a black eye that was already purpling, tears streaming down his face. A kid had punched him during recess. His mother, when confronted by school officials, claimed her son had been defending Holloway's daughter, who attended the same school, from unfounded accusations and slander. She held her son while he cried, feeling something break inside her chest. "I'm sorry," she whispered into his hair. "I'm so sorry, baby. Why are people being mean to me?" he asked, voice muffled against her shoulder. "I didn't do anything wrong." She didn't know how to explain that there were people in the world who would hurt children to protect their own power and secrets. Didn't know how to explain that sometimes doing the right thing came with terrible costs. That evening, another letter arrived via certified mail, requiring her signature. The lawsuit had been expanded, not just $5 million anymore, $10 million now. They were adding charges against her personally: defamation of character, intentional infliction of emotional distress, extortion, blackmail, criminal conspiracy. She sat on the kitchen floor and cried for the first time since this all began. Great heaving sobs that came from somewhere deep inside. Sarah found her there an hour later, having let herself in with the emergency key she'd been given. "It's okay," Sarah said, sitting down beside her on the floor, which wasn't true at all, but she appreciated the lie and the solidarity. "They're going to destroy me," she said. "They're going to take everything. My reputation, my son, my future." "No," Sarah said firmly. "They're going to try. But you're stronger than they think. And you're not alone. We're going to fight this and we're going to win." Dear Patricia Williams called 2 days later, her voice tight with barely controlled excitement. "We found him," she said without preamble. Interpol tracked his passport used to Costa Rica, specifically to a resort town called Tamarindo. "We're coordinating with their government for extradition proceedings. It will take time, maybe weeks, possibly months, but we're moving forward with formal charges." Hope kindled in her chest like a small flame catching and kindling. "What about the civil lawsuit he filed against me? He can't continue litigation from a foreign country while facing criminal charges. His lawyer just requested a continuance, arguing his client can't adequately participate in his own defense from abroad. We pushed back hard. The judge granted us a preliminary hearing to determine if the charges against you are frivolous and should be dismissed with prejudice." "When?" 2 weeks from Thursday. 2 weeks. She could survive 2 weeks. She'd already survived this long. But then her ex-husband got involved in a way she hadn't anticipated. He was a judge, not in this county but in the neighboring one. Influential. Well-connected. Dangerous in the way that men with institutional power were dangerous. He called her on a Friday night, voice cold and measured like a snake moving through grass, like a threat delivered in the language of the law. "What you're doing is going to permanently hurt our son," he said without greeting. "I'm petitioning for an emergency custody evaluation. If the state finds you're creating a hostile and unstable environment through these public allegations and this obsessive vendetta, I can and will take him away from you permanently." She went numb, the phone suddenly feeling impossibly heavy in her hand. "You wouldn't do that to him." "I would. And I will. Unless you drop this crusade immediately and accept Holloway's settlement offer. Your choice. $3 million in shared custody, or nothing and you lose your son forever." She hung up, hands shaking so violently she dropped the phone. Called Sarah, explained the situation through tears and rage and terror. "He's bluffing," Sarah said, though she didn't sound entirely certain. "He can't prove anything. You're a good mother. The court won't take your son based on rumors and tabloid accusations. But what if they do? What if telling the truth costs me my child? Then we fight that too. But you can't let them blackmail you with your love for your son." But the fear was debilitating, all-consuming, making it impossible to think about anything else. She couldn't sleep, jerking awake every hour from nightmares of losing her son. Couldn't eat, her stomach in constant knots. Every social worker visit, and they were mandated after her ex-husband's complaint, felt like an interrogation, like she was being judged and found wanting. They asked her son if she was a good mother, if she made him feel safe. He said yes, his voice small but certain. They asked if she ever left him alone or put him in dangerous situations. He said no, looking confused by the question. They asked about the allegations against her for embezzlement. She explained what really happened, provided documentation of the sexual harassment complaint she'd filed, showed them the termination letter that mentioned nothing about theft. They wrote it all down in their official notebooks and said they'd be in touch with their findings. The preliminary hearing arrived on a Tuesday morning that felt simultaneously too soon and not soon enough. She sat at the defendant's table in a small courtroom with Sarah beside her, wearing her best outfit, a simple dress she'd bought specifically for this, trying to look respectable and responsible. The judge, not her ex-husband, thank God, but a woman named Judge Elena Torres, reviewed the complaints with evident skepticism. "Mr. Holloway's legal team is alleging defamation, extortion, and blackmail," Judge Torres said, reading from the thick file in front of her. But looking at the evidence provided by the defense, the video confession, the documents found in the penthouse, the testimony of DA Williams regarding the criminal investigation, I don't see how any of these charges have merit. In fact, the plaintiff appears to be retaliating against Ms. Chun for uncovering evidence of substantial criminal activity. Webb Holloway's lawyer stood quickly. "Your Honor, those documents were obtained illegally through trespassing. The defendant owned the property," Judge Torres interrupted. "She had every right to enter and examine what was there." Continue. "The video is of questionable authenticity and may have been doctored or obtained under duress. Your IT experts confirmed it was authentic and unedited. Anything else?" Webb hesitated, clearly not expecting this response. "We request additional time to." "Request denied. Here's my ruling. I'm dismissing this lawsuit as frivolous and without merit. Furthermore, I'm imposing sanctions against the plaintiff's legal team in the amount of $50,000, payable to the defendant to cover her legal fees. Additionally, I'm recommending that the State Bar investigate Mr. Webb's conduct for filing nuisance litigation intended to intimidate a witness in a criminal proceeding." She heard Sarah exhale beside her, a long breath of relief. "Furthermore," Judge Torres continued, her voice taking on an edge of steel, "I'm ordering the plaintiff to cease all contact with the defendant and her family, pending the outcome of criminal trial proceedings. Violation of this order will result in immediate arrest and detention. This harassment stops now. It was over. Not the criminal case. That would continue, would take months or years. But the immediate threat had been neutralized. The lawsuit was gone. The financial pressure released." She walked out into the summer heat, blinking like someone emerging from a dark room into sudden sunlight. A reporter approached with a microphone and camera. "Miss Chun, how do you feel about Judge Torres's ruling?" She looked at the camera, thought about her sister and her niece, thought about all the women who'd stayed silent. "I feel like justice is finally possible," she said, voice steady. "I feel like maybe telling the truth still matters in this world." That evening, her son hugged her for the first time in weeks without reluctance or fear. "Is it safe now?" he asked, looking up at her with eyes that trusted her to tell the truth. "Safer," she said, smoothing his hair back. "Much safer." The criminal trial began in October, when the summer heat had finally broken and autumn was arriving in Palmetto Beach. Holloway had been extradited from Costa Rica 3 weeks earlier, looking older and diminished in his orange jumpsuit, no longer the powerful man who'd terrorized women for 40 years. He sat at the defense table in the best suit his limited resources could now afford, face carefully composed into an expression of wounded dignity, like a man being persecuted rather than prosecuted. But he hadn't mastered this situation, couldn't control this narrative, because the evidence was undeniable and overwhelming. DA Williams presented the video confession first, playing it on large screens positioned so everyone in the courtroom could see clearly. Holloway's own voice, his own face, confessing to everything in detail that was both damning and specific. His lawyers tried every possible objection, argued it was coerced, claimed it was obtained illegally, suggested it had been doctored or edited, questioned the chain of custody, but the IT experts DA Williams had hired, specialists from the FBI's Computer Crimes Unit, confirmed under oath that it was authentic, unedited, and created approximately 5 years ago based on metadata analysis. Then the women testified, one after another, a parade of courage that brought tears to the gallery. Some had been bought off decades ago, but were willing to tell the truth now, breaking their non-disclosure agreements despite the legal risks because staying silent had become more painful than speaking. Others had documented their assaults at the time, but were intimidated into silence by lawyers and threats and settlements wrapped in legal language that made resistance seem futile. Each testimony was like a nail in a coffin, building a case so overwhelming that even Holloway's expensive defense team couldn't find cracks to exploit. On the 5th day of trial, a woman named Margaret Chun, no relation, testified about what Holloway had done to her in the Penthouse 30 years ago, when she was 16 years old and working her first job. "I was a summer employee at the hotel," she said, voice steady but eyes wet with tears she wouldn't let fall. "I worked in housekeeping. He invited me to see the view from the penthouse. Said it was the best view in Palmetto Beach. I was 16. I was flattered that someone important wanted to show me something special." The courtroom was absolutely silent, everyone leaning forward slightly. When I tried to leave, he locked the door, stood in front of it, started saying things about how pretty I was, how special, how he could help my career if I was nice to him. Her voice wavered but didn't break. I screamed. A hotel employee, a maintenance worker, heard me and broke down the door, threatened to call the police. She looked directly at Holloway, who stared at the table in front of him. But when I tried to file a police report, Holloway's lawyer visited my parents with a settlement offer. $40,000. We were poor. My father was dying of cancer. My mother worked 3 jobs. They needed the money desperately. "What did your parents do?" DA Williams asked gently. "They took it. Made me sign papers saying I would never talk about what happened. Made me promise to forget, to move on, to pretend it never happened." She wiped her eyes. "I've lived with that shame for 30 years, thinking somehow I'd caused it, thinking somehow I deserved it, thinking I was the only one. But you weren't the only one, were you? No. I was just one of many, one of dozens, maybe hundreds over 40 years. And today, finally, I'm telling the truth. And I'm telling you," she pointed at Holloway, "this man is a predator who used his power and money to hurt people and then silence them." When she finished, Margaret was shaking but standing tall, refusing to sit down until she was officially dismissed. The jury deliberated for 6 hours. Guilty on all counts. 17 counts of sexual assault, 3 counts of bribery of public officials, 2 counts of money laundering, 1 count of criminal conspiracy, 4 counts of obstruction of justice. Holloway's face didn't change as the verdicts were read, one after another, each guilty verdict another nail sealing his fate. But his hands, gripping the table in front of him, turned white at the knuckles, the only sign that he understood what was happening. The sentencing hearing took place 2 weeks later in the same courtroom. Judge Torres presided, her expression stern and unforgiving. "Mr. Holloway," she said, looking at him directly, "you have been convicted of some of the most serious crimes this court has seen. You systematically used your power, wealth, and position to prey on vulnerable women and girls. You silenced them with money and threats. You corrupted public officials to protect yourself. You showed no remorse, no empathy, no recognition of the devastating harm you caused." She paused, letting the words settle. "The prosecution has recommended 20 years. Your defense has requested leniency based on your age and health. I've considered both recommendations carefully." Another pause. 25 years in state prison. No possibility of parole for at least 20 years. You will register as a sex offender for life. You will pay restitution to your victims in amounts to be determined, and you will spend whatever time you have left understanding that actions have consequences, even if those consequences are delayed. The gavel came down with a sound like thunder. She sat in the gallery with Sarah, her son beside her holding her hand. When the judge pronounced the sentence, she felt something settle deep inside her chest. Not happiness. Justice didn't feel like happiness or celebration or triumph, but peace. A kind of deep, bone-level peace that came from knowing the truth had finally been told and heard and acknowledged. Outside the courthouse, reporters swarmed with cameras and microphones and questions shouted over each other. "How do you feel?" they asked. "What do you want to say to other survivors?" She took a breath, looked at the cameras. "I feel like my sister Sarah finally got her day in court," she said, voice steady and clear. "I feel like her daughter Maya's death meant something. That it wasn't just senseless tragedy but part of a larger story about accountability. I feel like maybe, just maybe, other women won't have to suffer what they suffered. Won't have to stay silent. Won't have to carry that shame alone." That evening, after the reporters had finally dispersed and the courthouse had emptied, she drove to the cemetery where her sister was buried in a simple grave marked with a modest stone. She laid flowers, jasmine, Sarah's favorite, on the grave and sat beside it as the sun set, painting the sky in shades of orange and purple. "He's going to jail," she whispered to the stone, to the ground, to the memory of her sister. "For a long time. For what he did to you. For what he did to Maya. For what he did to all of them. I'm sorry it took so long. I'm sorry I didn't know earlier. I'm sorry I couldn't save you. But I did what I could. I hope it's enough. I hope you can finally rest." The wind moved through the palms surrounding the cemetery, making them whisper and sway. Cicadas sang their endless song marking time the way they'd been doing for millions of years. She felt almost like Sarah was there with her, not as a ghost or a supernatural presence, but as a memory, a weight lifted, a wrong finally addressed after 20 years. Justice delayed but not ultimately denied. The settlement came through 6 months after the trial ended. Not from Holloway. He had almost nothing left after legal fees and asset seizures, but from the hotel's insurance company and the corporation that had previously owned the property before his downfall, both eager to settle civil claims before more lawsuits emerged. $5 million total, to be distributed among the victims. She received slightly more than the others, as the person who discovered and preserved the evidence, who'd made the prosecution possible in the first place. She donated $3 million immediately to establish a foundation for assault survivors. Named it the Sarah and Maya Hammond Foundation. Hired staff. Rented office space. Started building something that would outlast all of them. With the remaining $2 million, she renovated the Ocean View Hotel, transforming it from a monument to abuse into something entirely different. She hired contractors carefully, interviewing dozens before finding a crew she trusted, people who understood the project's importance, who treated the space with respect. Fired 2 contractors who didn't share that vision before finally assembling the right team. The renovation took 8 months of careful work. The Penthouse became a museum dedicated to exposing sexual violence and corruption. Display cases held the ledger, the documents, photographs from the trial, testimonies from survivors. Educational materials explained how institutions enable abuse. Resources listed organizations that could help. The main floors became a boutique hotel operating on different principles: fair wages for all employees, excellent security systems, a zero-tolerance harassment policy enforced rigorously. Every employee trained in recognizing and responding to abuse. The basement nightclub where wealthy tourists had once danced and drunk away their problems became a gathering space for survivors. Free counseling services. Support groups meeting weekly. A library of resources. A safe place to heal. The opening day came on a summer morning exactly 1 year after she'd bought the hotel at auction, standing in the same spot where she'd first entered with her 8-year-old son. She stood in the renovated lobby now with that same son, taller now, older, changed by what they'd been through together. People moved through the space. Survivors coming to see the museum, activists meeting to plan new initiatives, journalists documenting the transformation. Sarah Chun, her lawyer who'd become her closest friend, arrived with her teenage daughter. DA Patricia Williams came with her entire staff, proud of what they'd accomplished together. And Margaret Chun, The woman who'd testified so powerfully at trial came with her own daughter, now the same age Margaret had been when Holloway assaulted her 30 years ago. They stood together in the Penthouse Museum, looking at the display cases that now held the evidence of Holloway's crimes preserved forever. "This is incredible," Margaret said, tears streaming down her face as she looked at her own testimony displayed respectfully. "This will help so many people. Give them hope. Show them that speaking up matters." She squeezed Margaret's hand, feeling the connection between survivors, the invisible threads that linked their stories. "Your testimony helped them," she said. "Your courage. Not me. You chose to speak when you could have stayed silent." That night, there was a gathering in the grand ballroom, the first celebration the Ocean View had hosted in decades. Local leaders came and survivors and activists working on similar causes. Music played. People laughed and cried and shared stories. Plans were made for future work, new investigations, systemic changes. She stood on the balcony overlooking the ocean, her son tucked under her arm, watching the sun set over water that had witnessed so much but kept no secrets, that erased everything with each wave and began fresh with each tide. "We did it," her son said, voice filled with pride and relief. "We did," she agreed, holding him close. "Are things going to be normal now?" She thought about that question carefully, wanting to give him an honest answer. "I don't know if normal is the right word," she said finally, "but things will be better, safer, more honest. And that's more important than normal." He nodded, satisfied with that answer in the way only children can be. The cicadas sang in the palms their endless summer song. The ocean rolled in and out, patient and eternal, witness to human drama but unchanged by it. And she felt for the first time in years like she could finally breathe fully. Like the weight that had been pressing on her chest since her sister died had finally lifted. Like justice, however delayed, however imperfect, was still possible in a world that often seemed designed to protect the powerful and silence the vulnerable. 2 years after the hotel's reopening, she stepped back from daily operations to focus entirely on the foundation. She hired an experienced hotel manager, a woman who'd survived her own assault years ago and understood the mission viscerally. The Sarah and Maya Hammond Foundation grew rapidly, outgrowing its initial office space twice. By the 3rd year, they'd supported 53 investigations into sexual violence and corruption across 6 states. 23 criminal prosecutions were underway. 8 convictions had been secured. Dozens of survivors had received counseling, legal aid, and financial support to rebuild their lives. The foundation's offices occupied the entire 2nd floor of the Ocean View Hotel now, where the restaurant had once been. 15 full-time staff members worked there. Volunteers came through the doors every day, lawyers offering pro bono services, therapists providing free counseling, investigators following leads. She sat in a small office overlooking the ocean, reading through grant proposals and survivor applications, when her son appeared in the doorway. He was 11 now, tall and serious, carrying himself with a maturity that sometimes broke her heart because she knew she'd forced him to grow up faster than he should have. "Mom, there's someone here to see you. Says her name is Sarah." She looked up confused. "Sarah-chan is in court today." "No, Sarah Hammond." Her heart stopped. She stood slowly, walked downstairs on legs that felt unsteady. The woman stood in the lobby, gray-haired and elegant, wearing a simple dress that somehow conveyed both dignity and nervousness. She had kind eyes that looked familiar in a way that made her chest tighten. "Hi, honey," the woman said softly, voice trembling. "I'm your mother. Sarah's mother. Your grandmother." She couldn't move, couldn't breathe. "I saw the documentary about what you did," her mother continued, tears starting. "I saw the foundation, the museum, everything you built, and I realized I couldn't stay away anymore, couldn't keep hiding from what happened. You abandoned us," she heard herself say, voice flat. "I know. I was afraid. I was weak. When Sarah got pregnant, when Holloway threatened us, I told her to take the money and disappear. I chose silence over my own daughter." The tears were flowing freely now. "I've lived with that shame every single day for 40 years, watching from a distance as Sarah struggled alone, as Maya grew up without family, as both of them died before I found the courage to speak. Why now? Because you showed me it was possible. To tell the truth. To fight back. to build something good from something terrible. And I wanted you to know." Her voice broke. "I'm so sorry. I'm so sorry I wasn't there for my daughter, for my granddaughter, for you." She stood frozen for a long moment, decades of pain and anger and abandonment warring with the desperate need to have family, to not be alone anymore. Then she crossed the lobby and held her mother while she cried, feeling her own tears come finally, releasing grief she'd carried for years. They sat together in the Penthouse Museum later, looking at the exhibit dedicated to Sarah Hammond, photographs of her sister as a teenager. Beautiful, hopeful, smiling at a camera held by someone who loved her. Her journal entries, donated by Charleston friends who'd kept them safe. Letters she'd written but never sent. "She was so beautiful," her mother whispered. "So full of life and dreams." "She was," she agreed, throat tight. "I wish I could tell her I'm sorry, that I was wrong, that she deserved better." "Tell me," she said, taking her mother's hand. "Tell me everything about her. The stories I never heard. The memories I don't have. Let me record it. Let it be part of the museum, part of the permanent record." So her mother did, sitting in front of a camera while a foundation staff member recorded. She told stories about Sarah as a child, curious, fearless, always asking questions. About Sarah as a teenager, falling in love with the ocean, dreaming of becoming a marine biologist. About Sarah's pregnancy, the fear, the shame imposed by a judgmental community, the isolation. "I failed her," her mother said directly to the camera. "I chose protecting our family's reputation over protecting my daughter. I let a powerful man destroy her life because I was too frightened to fight back. I want other mothers watching this to know, silence doesn't protect anyone. It only enables abusers and abandons victims." The testimony was raw and painful and honest. And when it was added to the museum, it became one of the most powerful exhibits, viewed by thousands of people over the following years. Because it showed that even those who failed, who made terrible choices, could eventually choose truth. Could eventually stand up for what was right, even if that standing came decades too late. That redemption was possible. That it was never too late to tell the truth. The documentary premiered at Sundance Film Festival 6 years after she bought the hotel. The Ocean View. How one woman exposed a predator. It traced the entire story. Her sister's assault, her niece's suicide, the 20-year cover-up, the discovery of the documents, the video confession, the trial, the foundation's work. Interviews with survivors, prosecutors, investigators, and her. It won the Audience Award and 3 additional prizes. She watched it stream on opening night with her son, her mother, Sarah Chun, Margaret, and D.A. Williams gathered in the foundation's conference room. Seeing her story told by professional filmmakers, with cinematography and music and narrative structure, felt surreal. She looked like a hero in the documentary, determined, fearless, unbreakable. She didn't feel like a hero. She felt like someone who'd been angry and heartbroken and refused to let that pain be meaningless. But maybe that's what heroes were. Ordinary people who refused to accept injustice, who fought back even when fighting seemed futile. The documentary brought international attention. News networks ran stories. Podcasters did deep dives. Books were optioned. A legislative committee invited her to testify about institutional failures in prosecuting sexual violence. More survivors came forward, not just victims of Holloway, but of other men, other institutions that had hidden their crimes under layers of money and silence and legal threats. The foundation became overwhelmed with requests for help. They hired more staff, opened satellite offices, partnered with organizations across the country. The hotel became a pilgrimage site for survivors and activists, a symbol of transformation from place of abuse to place of healing. She received letters from around the world, survivors thanking her for breaking the silence, for showing that fighting back was possible, for building something that outlasted the pain. One letter stayed with her, kept in her desk drawer where she could read it on difficult days. "Dear Ms. Chun, I was assaulted 10 years ago by my boss. I took his settlement and signed his NDA because I thought I had no choice. But watching your documentary, seeing what you built, I realized silence was destroying me more than speaking ever could. Yesterday I broke my NDA and filed a police report. My lawyer says your foundation's resources and legal precedents made this possible. Thank you for showing me that some things are worth more than money. Some things are worth everything." A survivor. She kept that letter next to the photograph of Sarah and Maya, a reminder of why the work mattered. 8 years after buying the hotel, she sat in her office reading grant proposals when her son, now 15, taller than her, his voice deep, appeared in the doorway. "There's a woman here," he said. "Says she inherited a church in Savannah, found something hidden in the archives. Sounds familiar." She smiled. "Send her up." Because the work wasn't done, would never be fully done. There were more stories out there. More truths waiting to be told. More people who needed someone to believe them, to fight with them, to show them that justice was possible. Her uncle Eli had protected gold for 40 years and left it for someone to find. She'd protected truth for 8 years and would continue protecting it. One hotel, one foundation, one story at a time. Some inheritances come with chains, others come with wings. And she'd chosen to fly. What did you think of my story? Leave your thoughts in the comments and rate it from 0 to 10. Don't forget to subscribe and turn on the bell so you won't miss next story. Widowed mother of 3 was kicked out by her in-laws until the summer lawyer read the real will. She lost her husband, her home, and her dignity in one afternoon when his family threw her out of the estate. But when a small-town lawyer arrived with a document no one knew existed, the family that destroyed her discovered they'd made a fatal mistake. A year later, the museum was thriving. School groups came on field trips. Historians conducted research in the archive she built below deck. Veterans gathered on the anniversary of Eli's death to share stories. The foundation had awarded its first grants, $50,000 each to 3 families whose loved ones had exposed government wrongdoing. She bought a house near the marina, small, yellow, with a porch that overlooked the water. Her son had his own room. His asthma was under control. He was thriving. She sat on that porch one evening in late summer, watching the sun set over the marina. Sarah visited often. They'd become close, more than friends. Family. August had moved into a cottage nearby. They had dinner together twice a week. Rebecca was working on a book about the case. It was already optioned for a documentary. Her phone buzzed. A text from the foundation's director. "Just got a call from a woman in Savannah. Says her grandmother left her a property and she found something strange. Wants to know if we can help." She smiled. "Send me the details," she typed back. Because the work wasn't done. There were more stories out there. More truths waiting to be told. More people who needed someone to believe them. She looked out at the Evangeline lights glowing softly in the dusk. Her uncle had started something, and she was going to finish it. Not just for him. For everyone who'd ever been silenced. For everyone who'd ever been afraid to speak up. For everyone who believed that some things were worth fighting for. She closed her eyes, felt the salt breeze on her face, and whispered, "Thank you. Some inheritances come with chains. Others come with wings. What did you think of my story? Leave your thoughts in the comments and rate it from 0 to 10. Don't forget to subscribe and turn on the bell so you won't miss the next story."